separating Palestinians from other Palestinians. Okay, the apartheid wall goes straight down the middle of some streets. Journeys that might have taken you like 2 seconds to go from one side of the road to the other will now take hours to make sure you kind of go around the wall. Those are just some aspects of life in Jerusalem, where also, just as a final example, there is one refugee camp in Jerusalem called att1 camp, which is now had a special checkpoint built for it by the Israeli occupation authorities to control who enters and comes out of East Jerusalem. Sorry, just examples, there's so many, ones keep coming to me. Another one is that Palestinians with East Jerusalem residency rights, not citizens, but residency rights, it's a different kind of ID, the Israeli authorities and the Jerusalem municipality advances policies that makes it easy to take away the residency rights of those Palestinians in East Jerusalem, okay, in a way that is not applied to Jews in Jerusalem. Again, the idea being to control or manipulate the demographics. Going to the West Bank now, as to give you some examples. The West Bank is maybe more well known, perhaps, in terms of what goes on there. Most people have heard of the settlements, Israel's settlements, again, built in defiance of international law since 1967. Israel disputes that they're even illegal under international law, okay? And despite the fact that that is affirmed year after year in the UN, despite the fact that it's been affirmed in the International Court of Justice, etc., it's the mainstream world opinion that it's illegal for Israel to build those colonies in the West Bank. But you've got to make sure that you don't think Israel's settlements, when you hear about them in the news, are these kind of isolated, hilltop, small communities. Okay? Some of them are like that, some of them are very small, but many of them, many of those colonies are large, substantial colony blocks that have been designed with a specific purpose in mind, in terms of controlling underground water resources, in terms of cutting off East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank, in terms of chopping the West Bank in different segments. Okay, so you look at a map, you look at the colony blocks of Gush Etzion, Ariel, Ma'ale Adumim, all these blocks. You're not talking about a few caravans on a hill, you're talking about large, significant colonies that have been built since '67, maintained, and not just these communities either. They're part of a wider regime that includes roads that the Israeli Authority controls, areas that the Israeli military reserves for training purposes in. Okay, remember, this is occupied land, and they'll tell Palestinian farmers that you can't enter that area because we're training in this area. Home demolitions. Palestinians' homes are demolished in the West Bank for quote-unquote not having a permit to build. Maybe that sounds reasonable enough. Maybe I couldn't arrive in California and build a house without having the necessary permission. That's true. But look how Israel manipulates the bureaucracy and the laws to achieve its apartheid goals. It makes it almost impossible for the Palestinian family to get that permit in the first place. Okay? A UN survey a couple of years ago reviewed the past few years and found that well over 90% of all applications for a building permit were denied. So in other words, it's impossible for you to legally build under the apartheid occupation. If you build anyway, because you feel like you don't have a choice, and remember, we're not talking about huge mansions here. A friend of mine who has outstanding demolition orders on his property, what the Israeli soldiers have put demolition orders on are a shelter for a chicken coop. They've put a demolition order on an underground water container. They put a demolition order on the corrugated iron roof, just the roof of another structure. So we're not talking about big structures, but they haven't got the permission to build on their own land. And if they haven't demolished it themselves, then the Israeli army comes to demolish it for them. So side by side, you have a Palestinian community without citizenship, without Israeli citizenship, who are subject to military law, who Israeli soldiers can take in the middle of the night from their beds, as they do, including with children, and can put in prison without a trial in front of a military judge. Those same people can't legally build under this regime. And alongside them are Israeli citizens who come and go as they please across the so-called Green Line, who live in settlements where building continues as it would do normally in a regular city, so to speak. So those are just some aspects of what it looks like in the West Bank too. And of course, there's also the Gaza Strip, whom I'm sure everybody's heard of, maybe potentially more than all of the other places. And that